The conference room smelled like failure. David Ross had been sitting across from the Televorian High Council for 3 hours, and every minute felt like watching a disaster approach in slow motion. The aliens on the other side of the table wore their purple ceremonial robes and looked at him the way someone might look at an insect that had wandered into their home. "Ambassador Ross," the High Commander said, his voice dripping with boredom. "Your species continues to make demands as if you have any power in this situation. It is almost charming." David kept his face neutral. He had been trained for this. Years of diplomatic service had taught him how to stay calm when everything inside him wanted to flip the table and start shouting. But that would not help the 2 million humans who were now living under Televorian occupation on the colony worlds of New Terra and Haven's Edge. "High Commander, Earth is not making demands. We are asking for basic decency. You took 2 of our worlds without warning. You forced our people from their homes. Families were separated. Children were put in detention centers. We are asking you to return what you took and compensate those who suffered." The High Commander laughed. It was not a pleasant sound. Several other council members joined in, their alien features twisted in amusement. David felt his jaw tighten but forced himself to remain seated. "Compensation?" The High Commander leaned forward. "Your people should be grateful we allowed them to live. The Televorian Empire has ruled this region of space for 300 years. We have crushed species far older and more advanced than yours. You have been in space for what, 70 years? You are children playing with technology you barely understand." David reached into his jacket and pulled out a datapad. He placed it on the table and slid it toward the High Commander. "This contains detailed documentation of what your forces did on our worlds. The raids on civilian homes, the destruction of hospitals and schools, the executions of anyone who resisted. We have names, dates, and evidence. The galactic community will see this." The High Commander did not even look at the datapad. "The galactic community is afraid of us. They will do nothing. They never do." "Then let me be very clear," David said, and for the first time his voice carried an edge that made a few of the council members shift uncomfortably. "Earth has tried to resolve this peacefully. We sent messages. We requested meetings. We followed every diplomatic protocol in the book. This is your final chance to make this right." The room went quiet. The High Commander stared at David with his large, dark eyes. Then he smiled, showing rows of sharp teeth. "Or what, Ambassador? Will your primitive little world declare war on the Televorian Empire? We have 6,000 warships. Our military has never lost a major conflict. You have a handful of patrol vessels and mining ships with weapons bolted onto them. This is not a negotiation. This is us informing you of reality." David stood up slowly. He gathered his datapad and looked at each council member in turn. "You are making the worst mistake of your civilization's history. Is that a threat?" The High Commander rose as well, towering over David by almost 2 feet. "No. It is a warning. Humans are good at many things. We are excellent at adaptation. We are masters of innovation. We have survived ice ages, plagues, wars that nearly destroyed our entire species. But there is one thing we are better at than anything else." David paused, letting the silence stretch. "We are very, very good at war." The High Commander waved a dismissive hand. "Guards, escort the ambassador back to his ship and send a message to Earth. They have 2 choices. Submit to the Empire and accept our rule over their colonies, or we will add Earth itself to our territory. They have 1 week to decide." 2 Televorian soldiers approached. David did not resist as they guided him toward the door. But as he reached the exit, he stopped and looked back one more time. "You were warned," he said quietly. "Remember that." The door sealed behind him with a hiss. David walked through the corridors of the Televorian station, his mind already working through what came next. The guards stayed close but did not speak. They probably thought this was over. They probably thought Earth would surrender like so many other species had before. They were wrong. When David reached his shuttle, he dismissed his small security team and sealed himself in the cockpit alone. His hands moved across the control panels, activating the encrypted communication system that linked directly to Earth's military command. The face that appeared on the screen belonged to General Rebecca Walsh, head of the United Human Space Forces. "I take it diplomacy failed," she said. "It was not a question. They laughed at us. They threatened to invade Earth. They will not return our colonies or acknowledge they did anything wrong." David's voice was steady, but his eyes were hard. "Rebecca, they think we are weak. They think we are nothing. The general nodded slowly. Did you deliver the final warning? I did. They ignored it. Then it is time. Rebecca looked off screen for a moment, then back at David. Protocol 7 is authorized. All fleets are green-lit. We are going to show the Talavorians what happens when they mistake patience for weakness. David felt no satisfaction, only grim necessity. How long until the fleets are in position? 72 hours. Every ship we have has been waiting for this order. Hidden shipyards, reserve fleets, everything we have built in secret for the past 20 years. The Talavorians think they know our strength. They are about to learn they were counting toys while we hit our real weapons. What do you need from me? Get back to Earth safely. Let the politicians start evacuating non-essential personnel from border stations. And David, thank you. You gave them every chance to do the right thing. The screen went dark. David sat in silence for a long moment, then initiated the launch sequence. His shuttle lifted off from the Talvorian station and began the journey back toward human space. Behind him, the Talvorian Empire continued with their day, confident and unchallenged. They had no idea that across human territory, thousands of warships were waking from silence. Crews who had trained in secret for years were boarding vessels. Commanders were opening sealed orders. Weapon systems that had been hidden in dark corners of space were powering up. Earth had tried peace. The Talvorians chose war. Now humanity would teach them why that was a fatal mistake. Patricia Hayes had forgotten what silence sounded like until now. For 3 weeks, her fleet had been drifting in the empty space between stars with every system running on minimum power. No active sensors. No communication chatter. Just the quiet hum of life support and the occasional creak of metal expanding and contracting in the cold void. She floated near the viewport of the UHSF Defiance, looking out at the 200 ships that made up the 7th Fleet. They hung in space like sleeping predators, dark and patient. Every vessel had been positioned carefully, spread across a volume of space large enough that they would appear as background noise to any scans that might sweep this region. Her second in command, Commander Luis Garcia, drifted up beside her. They had disabled the artificial gravity to reduce their energy signature even further. Admiral, the crew is getting restless. They have been asking questions. Patricia glanced at him. What kind of questions? The kind that comes from sitting in the dark for weeks without knowing why. Some of them think this is another drill. Others are starting to wonder if Command forgot about us out here. She almost smiled. Command has not forgotten us. None of the fleets have been forgotten. We are exactly where we need to be. And where is that, if I may ask? At the edge of Talavorian space, waiting for the order that will change everything. Luis was quiet for a moment. He had served with Patricia for 6 years and knew when she was holding back information. This is about the colonies, is not it? New Terra and Haven's Edge. Patricia turned to face him fully. What do you know about Protocol 7? His eyes widened slightly. Only rumors. They say it is a contingency plan in case Earth ever faces an existential threat. Full military mobilization. No holding back, those rumors are correct. And as of 3 hours ago, Protocol 7 has been authorized. Ambassador Ross delivered our final warning to the Talavorians. They refused. They threatened to invade Earth itself. Luis exhaled slowly. So we are going to war. We are already at war. The Talavorians just do not know it yet. Patricia pulled up a holographic display from her wrist computer. It showed a tactical map of the entire region. Red markers indicated Talavorian military installations. Blue markers showed human fleet positions. There were far more blue markers than anyone outside of High Command knew existed. How many ships do we have? Luis asked, staring at the map. Across all fleets, including the reserve forces that have been hidden for 20 years, we have approximately 4,000 combat-capable vessels. The Talvorians think we have maybe 300. 4,000? Where did we hide 4,000 ships? Patricia tapped another section of the map. Asteroid fields, gas giant atmospheres, dark regions behind nebulas. Humanity learned a long time ago that if you want to survive, you prepare for the worst. After first contact with hostile species, Earth's governments made a decision. We would present a peaceful face to the galaxy, but we would also build a military force capable of defending ourselves if that peace was ever broken. Luis studied the map, his tactical mind already working through the implications. 12 targets. We are hitting 12 Talavorian installations simultaneously. Correct. While they are trying to figure out what happened at one location, 11 others will be going dark at the same time. We are not just attacking them. We are cutting off their ability to coordinate a response. A soft chime echoed through the ship. Patricia's command console lit up with an incoming priority message. She pulled herself over to it and entered her authorization code. The message was short, just 2 words. Protocol 7. All crew battle stations, Patricia announced over the ship-wide channel. Her voice was calm but carried absolute authority. This is not a drill. Repeat, this is not a drill. Restore full power to all systems. Activate weapons. Prepare for combat operations. The Defiance came alive. Lights flickered on throughout the ship. The hum of the reactor increased as it ramped up to full power. Artificial gravity engaged, pulling everyone back to the deck. Throughout the fleet, 200 ships began waking from their long sleep. Patricia pulled up the tactical display at her command chair. Luis took his position at the weapons console. Around the bridge, officers were sliding into their roles with practiced efficiency. These people had trained for years for this moment. Communications. Send the following message to all fleet commanders on encrypted Channel 7. Execute Operation Falling Hammer. All ships jump to assigned targets on my mark. Message sent, Admiral. All ships report ready. Patricia looked at the chronometer. Across human space, 11 other fleets were receiving the same order at the exact same moment. The timing had to be perfect. The Talvorians needed to understand that they were not facing a single attack. They were facing a coordinated assault across their entire military infrastructure. Helm, plot jump coordinates to the Krelva system. Tactical. I want firing solutions ready the moment we drop out of hyperspace. We are not giving them time to react. Coordinates locked, the helmsman reported. Weapons hot, Luis confirmed. Patricia took a breath. This was it. The moment when humanity stopped being patient and started being dangerous. She thought about the 2 million people living under Talvorian occupation. She thought about the families that had been separated, the children in detention centers, the people who had been forced from their homes. All ships. This is Admiral Hayes. For 3 weeks we have been sitting in the dark, waiting. Today we show the Talvorians what happens when they threaten our people and ignore our warnings. We did not want this war, but they forced our hand. Now we will fight it on our terms. Remember your training. Trust your crew, and show them why you never back a human into a corner. She closed the channel and looked at her crew. Young faces, old faces, people from every corner of Earth and its colonies. They were ready. Jump in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, jump. The stars stretched and bent as the 7th Fleet vanished into hyperspace. They traveled through dimensions that normal physics could not explain, crossing light years in minutes. When they emerged on the other side, they would be deep inside Talvorian territory, weapons ready and no warning given. The Talvorians thought they knew humanity. They thought they were dealing with weak primitives who could be bullied into submission. In a few minutes, that illusion would shatter like glass. Patricia watched the countdown timer. 30 seconds until they dropped back into normal space. She gripped the arms of her chair. All hands brace for combat. The timer hit 0. The universe snapped back into focus. The Defiance and its entire fleet appeared in orbit around Krelva, home to one of the largest Talvorian military stations in this sector. The station was massive, easily 10 times the size of anything humanity had built. Its weapons platforms tracked toward the new arrivals, but they were slow. Designed for honor duels and ceremonial combat between equally matched opponents. Fire, Patricia ordered. The 7th Fleet opened fire as one. Hundreds of missiles and energy beams crossed the void. The Talvorians tried to raise shields, but human weapons had been designed specifically to counter their technology. The first salvo punched through their defenses and tore into the station's superstructure. Alarms blared. The Talvorians scrambled to respond. But humanity had already moved on to Phase 2 of the attack, and the Empire was about to learn that they had made a terrible, terrible mistake. Fire does not burn in space, but the Talvorian defense station looked like it was trying anyway. Explosions bloomed across its hull as human missiles found weak points in its armor. Debris spiraled outward in slow motion, tumbling through the void while the massive structure listed to one side. Commander Richard Stone pulled his fighter into a tight roll, avoiding a stream of plasma fire from one of the station's automated defense turrets. Around him, 40 other pilots from the Defiance flew in loose formation, moving like a school of fish that could think and react as one mind. Raptor Squadron, this is Raptor Lead. The Admiral wants that station's reactor offline in the next 10 minutes. Let's make it happen. Richard keyed his weapon systems and locked onto a cluster of power conduits running along the station's outer ring. Follow my lead. We go in fast, hit the weak points, and get out before they can target us properly. Copy that, lead. We are right behind you. Richard pushed his throttle forward. The fighter responded instantly, accelerating toward the station, at speeds that would have turned his body into paste if not for the inertial dampeners. The Talvorians were still firing, but their weapons were designed for large ship combat. They tracked too slowly to catch something as small and fast as a human strike craft. The other militaries in the galaxy fought with honor and ceremony. They announced their attacks. They gave their enemies time to prepare. They followed rules that had been established over thousands of years of civilized warfare. Humans did not care about any of that. Richard's targeting computer beeped as it achieved lock. He squeezed the trigger and watched 4 missiles streak away from his fighter. They impacted the power conduits in rapid succession, each explosion feeding into the next. Secondary detonations rippled along the station's hull. "Nice shooting, lead," one of his pilots called out. "Their shields just dropped in sections 4 and 5. All squadrons exploit that opening. Hit them where it hurts." Human fighters swarmed through the gap like wasps attacking a threat to their nest. The Talvorian station was massive and powerful, but it had been built with the assumption that enemies would approach slowly and fight according to established patterns. Nobody had prepared them for an enemy that struck from unexpected angles with weapons designed to maximize damage rather than demonstrate skill. A Talvorian cruiser broke away from its position near the station and tried to intercept the fighters. Richard saw it coming and smiled inside his helmet. The cruiser was fast for its size, but it was still thinking like every other military ship in the galaxy. Raptor Squadron, split formation, Delta pattern. His pilots scattered instantly, breaking into pre-planned groups that moved in different directions. The cruiser's gunners tried to track them but could not decide which group to prioritize. In that moment of hesitation, Richard looped back around and came at the cruiser from below, where its shields were weakest. He did not fire missiles this time. Instead, he armed the electromagnetic pulse weapon that every human fighter carried. The weapon was not flashy, and it did not cause explosions. It just sent out a focused burst of energy that fried electronics and overloaded power systems. The cruiser's lights flickered and went dark. Its engines died. It began drifting, powerless and helpless. Raptor lead to defiance. Enemy cruiser disabled. Sending boarding coordinates. Acknowledged, Raptor lead. Marine teams are launching now. Richard watched as a dozen assault shuttles detached from the human fleet and burned toward the disabled cruiser. The Talvorians inside would be confused and disoriented, trying to restore power while dealing with the fact that their ship had just become a coffin floating in space. The Marines would breach the hull, secure the crew, and take the ship intact. Not because humanity wanted trophies, but because prisoners and captured ships sent a message. The Talvorians were not being exterminated. They were being beaten, which was somehow worse for a species that prided itself on military dominance. All right, people, back to the primary target. That reactor is not going to destroy itself. The squadron regrouped and dove back toward the station. Richard could see the main reactor through his canopy now, a massive cylinder that glowed with barely contained energy. It was protected by multiple layers of armor and shielding, but humanity had studied Talvorian technology for months after the occupation of the colonies. They knew exactly where to hit. Targeting the reactor's cooling system. If we take that out, the whole thing will overheat and force an emergency shutdown. His computer highlighted 3 key junctions where the cooling pipes connected to the main reactor housing. They were small targets, but Richard had been flying combat missions since he was 20 years old. He was 38 now, and his hands were steady. The first missile hit perfectly. The cooling junction exploded in a spray of frozen vapor. The second and third missiles followed within seconds, destroying the other 2 junctions. Warning lights began flashing across the station's exterior as its automated systems detected the catastrophic failure. "Reactor overheating detected," his computer announced in a calm voice. "Estimated time to critical failure 8 minutes. Raptor Squadron, pull back. Everyone get clear of the station." The fighters broke away and accelerated toward the safety of the human fleet. Behind them, the Talvorian station was dying. Its crew would have time to evacuate if they moved quickly, but the station itself was finished. Richard docked his fighter in the Defiance's hangar bay and climbed out of the cockpit. His legs felt shaky after 3 hours of high-speed combat flying, but he forced himself to walk steady. Around him, other pilots were landing and dismounting, their faces showing the strange mixture of exhaustion and adrenaline that came after surviving a battle. Admiral Hayes was waiting in the hangar bay, which was unusual. She normally stayed on the bridge during combat operations. "Commander Stone," she said as he approached. "Excellent work out there. The station is offline and we took their cruiser intact." "Thank you, Admiral. The squadron performed well." "They did. And now comes the hard part." She gestured for him to follow her toward the hangar bay's observation window. Through it, they could see the Talvorian station. It was dark now, its reactor shut down to prevent a full meltdown. Escape pods were launching from various points along its hull. "We are letting them go?" Richard asked. "Yes. We are taking the station and the cruiser, but the crew goes free. We are making a point here, Commander. Humanity is not interested in slaughter. We are interested in results." Richard watched the escape pods drift toward the nearby planet. "With respect, Admiral, the Talvorians did not show that kind of mercy to our colonists. No, they did not. Which is exactly why we need to be better than them. If we start executing prisoners and destroying evacuation ships, we become the thing we are fighting against. We show strength through restraint, not through cruelty." A massive explosion lit up the void. Richard flinched, thinking the station's reactor had detonated. But then he realized the explosion had come from somewhere else, far across the system. What was that? Admiral Hayes checked her command tablet. That was the Talvorian shipyard on the far side of Krelva. The Ninth Fleet just took it out. By my count, that makes 8 of 12 targets secured in the first 4 hours of combat operations. Richard stared at her. 8? We took out 8 major Talvorian installations in 4 hours? And we are just getting started. The Empire thought they knew what humanity was capable of. They based their intelligence on our civilian shipping and our small patrol fleets. They never suspected we had been building a real military in secret for 20 years. How long until they figure it out? They already have. Intelligence reports that Talvorian High Command is in emergency session right now. They are trying to understand how they lost a third of their forward military capacity in less than half a day. Patricia smiled, but it was not a happy expression. They are learning what it means to ignore a warning from Earth. What happens next? Next, we consolidate our position here and prepare for Phase 2. The Talvorians will respond. They have to, or they lose credibility with every species they have bullied into submission. My guess is they will mobilize their Grand Fleet and try to hit us with overwhelming force. And will they succeed? Patricia looked out at the disabled station and the drifting escape pods. No, Commander. They will not, because we have been preparing for this moment since the day we realized the galaxy was not as peaceful as we hoped. The Talvorians chose this fight, now we are going to finish it. The Imperial Palace had stood for 800 years without ever hearing the sound of panic in its halls. Today was different. Ministers and military officers rushed through corridors that had only ever known calm deliberation. Their footsteps echoed off marble floors while holographic displays showed nothing but disaster after disaster. The Emperor sat on his throne and watched his civilization crumble in real time. The throne room's main display showed a tactical map of Talvorian space. Red warning indicators marked 12 locations where human forces had struck simultaneously. 8 of those installations were completely offline. 2 more were barely functional. The remaining 2 were under siege. How? The Emperor's voice was quiet, but everyone in the room heard it clearly. How did we not see this coming? The High Commander shifted uncomfortably. His ceremonial robes, which had seemed so impressive yesterday, now looked foolish and outdated. Your Majesty, our intelligence indicated that humanity possessed only a small defensive fleet, 300 vessels at most. We had no indication they were capable of mounting an operation of this scale. Then your intelligence was wrong. The Emperor stood, and several ministers took involuntary steps backward. They did not build 4,000 warships overnight. They did not train crews and develop tactics in secret without anyone noticing. Your intelligence failed because you were not looking. You were too busy being arrogant. The High Commander had no answer to that. A junior officer approached nervously, carrying a data tablet. Your Majesty, we have confirmed reports from all 12 attack sites. The human forces did not target civilian populations. They struck military installations only, and they allowed our personnel to evacuate before destroying key infrastructure. So they are showing mercy? One of the ministers asked. Perhaps we can negotiate. They are showing dominance, the Emperor interrupted. They are demonstrating that they can destroy our military whenever they choose. But they are letting our people live so that word of their power spreads. This is not mercy. This is psychological warfare. The room fell silent. Everyone understood the implications. Every species that the Talvorian Empire had conquered or intimidated over the past 3 centuries would hear about this. The Empire's reputation for invincibility had been shattered in less than a day. We must respond, the High Commander said. If we do nothing, if we show weakness, our subject species will rebel. The entire Empire will collapse. What do you suggest? Mobilize the Grand Fleet. 600 of our finest warships. We strike at Earth itself and end this quickly. Show the galaxy that attacking the Empire has consequences. The Emperor considered this. The Grand Fleet had never been defeated. It represented the absolute military might of the Talvorian civilization, held in reserve for exactly this kind of existential threat. How long to mobilize? 48 hours to gather the fleet and prepare for the jump to Earth. Make it happen. But High Commander, understand this. If the Grand Fleet fails, we have nothing left. This is everything we have. Do not fail me again. The High Commander bowed deeply and left to begin preparations. The other ministers and officers gradually filtered out until the Emperor was alone with his chief advisor, an old Talvorian named Dren who had served 3 emperors before this one. You think this is a mistake, the Emperor said. It was not a question. I think the humans gave us multiple warnings and we ignored all of them. I think Ambassador Ross was telling the truth when he said his people were good at war. And I think we are about to learn exactly how good they are. What choice do I have? If we do nothing, the Empire falls apart. If we surrender, we look weak and the Empire falls apart. At least this way we go down fighting. Dren nodded slowly. Then I hope our warriors are ready for what is coming. 2 days later, the Grand Fleet assembled at the staging point. 600 warships ranging from small destroyers to massive dreadnoughts that dwarfed anything humanity had built. The fleet represented centuries of military tradition and technological advancement. Its commanders were veterans of dozens of campaigns. Its crews were trained to perfection. Fleet Admiral Kren stood on the bridge of the flagship, the Eternal Glory, and looked out at the assembled might of his civilization. This should have been a moment of pride. Instead, he felt a gnawing sense of unease that he could not quite explain. All ships report ready, Admiral, his second-in-command reported. Very well. Transmit the jump coordinates. We are going to Earth. The fleet engaged its faster-than-light drives simultaneously. Space bent and twisted as 600 ships vanished from normal space and entered the hyperspace corridor that would carry them across dozens of light years in a matter of hours. What Admiral Kren did not know was that humanity had been watching the Grand Fleet gather. Satellites hidden in the outer edges of Talvorian space had tracked every ship movement. Human intelligence had predicted this response with near certainty. And Patricia Hayes had been positioned to intercept them since before the Grand Fleet had even begun mobilizing. The hyperspace corridor to Earth was not a straight line. Faster-than-light travel required following specific routes shaped by the gravity wells of stars and other massive objects. There were only a handful of practical routes from Talvorian space to Earth, and all of them passed through the same checkpoint near the Velis Nebula. Patricia had been waiting there for 3 days with the combined 1st and 7th fleets. 260 ships against 600. Not great odds, but humanity was not planning to fight fair. All ships, status report. Patricia ordered from the bridge of the Defiance. 1st Fleet reports ready. All ships are in position around the gravity well. 7th Fleet standing by. Minefield deployment complete. Patricia studied the tactical display. The humans had positioned themselves around the dying star at the center of this system. When the Talvorian fleet dropped out of hyperspace, they would emerge directly in the star's gravity well, moving too fast to immediately change course. And they would be surrounded by a 3-dimensional minefield that the humans had spent days carefully deploying. How long until they arrive? Estimated 20 minutes, Admiral. Patricia activated the fleet-wide channel. All ships, this is Admiral Hayes. The Talivorian Grand Fleet is about to drop into the worst tactical position of their lives. They think they are bringing overwhelming force to crush Earth. Instead, they are about to learn what happens when they fight humans on our terms. Remember, we are not here to commit genocide. We are here to break their military so thoroughly that they never threaten us again, disable when possible, destroy when necessary. But always remember that those are people in those ships just like us. She closed the channel and took a deep breath. This was it. The battle that would determine whether humanity remained free or became just another conquered species in the Talvorian Empire. Contact. Multiple hyperspace signatures detected. They are coming in hot. All ships weapons free. Fire on my command. Space tore open as 600 Talvorian warships dropped back into normal space. For a few seconds they were beautiful, their hulls gleaming in the dying light of the red giant star. Then the mines began detonating. The Talvorians had no time to raise shields. The mines had been designed to be nearly invisible until activated, and they exploded in a carefully choreographed sequence that created overlapping fields of destruction. Dozens of Talvorian ships were crippled in the first 30 seconds. Fire, Patricia ordered. The human fleets opened up with every weapon they had. Energy beams and kinetic rounds crossed the void. The Talvorians tried to respond, but they were trapped in the gravity well, unable to maneuver effectively. Their commanders shouted orders and their crews fought bravely, but they had been outmaneuvered before the battle even began. Admiral Kren watched his fleet die around him. Ships that had served the Empire for decades were torn apart by human weapons. He had brought overwhelming force just as he had been ordered, but force meant nothing when your enemy controlled the battlefield. "Get us out of here," he shouted. All ships, emergency jump to any coordinates outside this system. But jumping to hyperspace required time to calculate coordinates and charge the drives, time that the humans were not giving them. Patricia had studied every battle the Talvorian military had ever fought. She knew their tactics, their tendencies, their weaknesses, and she had designed this ambush to exploit all of them. News traveled fast across the galaxy, but disaster traveled faster. Within hours of the battle near Velis Nebula, every species in this region of space knew that the Talvorian Grand Fleet had been destroyed. The details varied depending on who was telling the story, but the core facts remained the same. 600 Talvorian warships had left to crush humanity. Less than 100 had returned. In the capital cities of a dozen subjugated worlds, people gathered in secret and whispered about rebellion. The Talvorian Empire had seemed eternal and unstoppable. Now it was bleeding from 1,000 cuts and everyone could see it. On the Talvorian homeworld, the Imperial Palace was no longer a place of confidence and power. It had become a tomb where the living walked among the ghosts of past glory. The Emperor sat in his private chambers, staring at casualty reports that stretched across multiple screens. 20,000 dead, 30,000 more wounded or missing, and the ships, dozens of proud warships that had carried the Empire's banner across the stars, now scattered as debris fields or captured by human forces. A knock on the door interrupted his dark thoughts. "Enter!" The High Commander walked in and the Emperor almost did not recognize him. The alien had aged 20 years in the past week. His ceremonial robes hung loose on his frame, as if he had physically diminished under the weight of failure. "Your Majesty, Ambassador Ross has returned. He is requesting an immediate audience, and of course he is." The Emperor stood and straightened his own robes. "I suppose it is time to face the consequences of our arrogance. Send him to the throne room. Let us see what price humanity demands for our stupidity." 20 minutes later, the Emperor sat on his throne and watched David Ross walk into the room. The human ambassador looked exactly as he had weeks ago, when the High Commander had dismissed him and laughed at his warnings. But everything else had changed. This time, David did not come alone. 2 human Marines in combat armor flanked him, and through the throne room's main viewport, everyone could see the human dreadnought that hung in orbit directly above the palace. Its weapons were not aimed at the surface, but the threat was clear. Earth could destroy the Talvorian homeworld whenever it chose. "Ambassador Ross," the Emperor said. His voice was steady, which took more effort than he wanted to admit. "Welcome back, Your Majesty." David stopped at the appropriate distance from the throne. He did not bow, which several courtiers noticed with quiet gasps. "I have been authorized by Earth to present terms for ending this conflict." Terms, not a demand for unconditional surrender. "We are not conquerors. We are not interested in ruling your people or taking your worlds. We are interested in justice for what you did to our colonies and assurance that it never happens again." The Emperor gestured for him to continue. Around the room, ministers and military officers listened in silence. The High Commander stood off to one side, his face unreadable. David pulled out a data tablet and began reading. First, immediate and complete withdrawal of all Talvorian forces from human colonies. New Terra and Haven's Edge will be returned to human control within 72 hours. Agreed, the Emperor said immediately. Second, full reparations to be paid to every family affected by the occupation. This includes compensation for destroyed property, lost income, and emotional suffering. The amount will be determined by an independent tribunal, but Earth estimates it at approximately 5 billion galactic credits. The Emperor winced but nodded. Agreed. Third, formal recognition of human sovereignty over all currently claimed human space. The Empire will sign a treaty acknowledging these boundaries and promising not to violate them. Agreed. Fourth, the Talvorian High Commander will publicly apologize for the invasion and occupation. He will resign his position and will be barred from holding any military office in the future. The High Commander stiffened. The Emperor glanced at him, then back at David. Agreed. And fifth, Earth will establish a permanent military presence in 3 neutral systems along the border between our territories. These bases will remain for a minimum of 20 years to ensure compliance with the treaty. This was the hardest term. It meant accepting human military forces on the Empire's doorstep, a constant reminder of their defeat. But the Emperor knew he had no leverage left to negotiate. Agreed. Are those all the terms? Yes, Your Majesty. Earth has no interest in humiliating your people or destroying your civilization. We simply want justice for what was done to us and security against future aggression. The Emperor stood and walked down from his throne until he was at eye level with David. Your people showed remarkable restraint during this conflict. You could have slaughtered our crews when you captured our ships. You could have bombarded our worlds from orbit. You could have done to us what we did to countless other species, but you did not. Why? David met his gaze without flinching. Because we remember what it was like to be weak. Humanity spent thousands of years fighting wars against ourselves. We know what cruelty looks like and we know what it costs. When we finally made it to the stars, we promised ourselves we would be better than our worst instincts. That does not mean we are pacifists. As you discovered, we are very good at war when we need to be. But we fight to protect, not to conquer. I see. The Emperor turned to address the entire room. Let it be recorded that the Talvorian Empire accepts all terms as presented by Earth. The war is over. We lost because we were arrogant and foolish. May future generations learn from our mistakes. He turned back to David. There is one question I must ask. How long were you preparing for this? How long did it take to build a fleet large enough to defeat us? 20 years, David said. From the moment Earth made first contact with a hostile species, we began planning for the possibility that we might need to defend ourselves. We hoped it would never be necessary. We tried every diplomatic option first, but we were not naive enough to think the galaxy was safe just because we wanted it to be. The High Commander spoke for the first time since David had entered the room. We should have listened to your warnings. Yes, David said simply. You should have. 3 days later, the human colonies were free. Talvorian ships withdrew in an orderly fashion, and human administrators returned to restore civil government. The families who had been displaced began the long journey home. It would take months or years for life to return to normal, but at least it would return. On New Terra, a woman named Sarah Chen stood in front of her house, which had been ransacked during the occupation. Her furniture was gone. Her belongings were scattered. But it was still her house and she was home. Her daughter, 10-year-old Amy, stood beside her. Mom, is it really over? The Talvorians are not coming back? Sarah put her arm around her daughter. It is really over. Earth made sure of that. How? By being strong when we needed to be strong and being merciful when we could afford to be merciful. By showing the galaxy that humanity will not be bullied, but we will not become bullies ourselves. Amy looked up at the sky, where human patrol ships now flew regular patterns. I want to join the Space Force when I grow up. I want to protect people like they protected us. Sarah smiled sadly. Then you will make me very proud. Across the galaxy, the other species that had been conquered or intimidated by the Talvorian Empire watched and learned. Humanity had done something no one else had managed in 3 centuries. They had stood up to the Empire and won, not through superior technology or overwhelming numbers, but through careful preparation, clever tactics, and the willingness to fight when fighting was necessary. The balance of power in this region of space had shifted. The Talvorian Empire would survive, but it would never again be the dominant force it once was. And humanity, the species that had seemed so primitive and weak just months ago, had earned a seat at the table where galactic decisions were made. David Ross stood in his office on Earth, looking out at the night sky. Somewhere up there, human ships were taking up positions in the neutral zones, beginning their 20-year watch. Somewhere up there, the Talvorians were rebuilding and hopefully learning from their mistakes. His assistant knocked on the door. "Ambassador, you have a call from the Varan Republic. They are requesting a diplomatic meeting to discuss a mutual defense treaty." David smiled. "Tell them I would be happy to meet. And contact the other ambassadors. I think we are going to be very busy for the next few months." As he turned back to his work, David thought about the price of peace. It had cost lives, ships, and resources, but it had also bought humanity respect and security in a dangerous galaxy, and perhaps most importantly, it had sent a message that would echo for generations. Ignore humanity's warnings at your own peril. "We will always offer peace first, but if you force us to war, we will show you exactly what millions of years of evolution on a deathworld created." 18 months after the war ended, Patricia Hayes found herself standing in a place she never expected to visit. The observation deck of Forward Base Sentinel overlooked a binary star system that marked the border between human and Talvorian space. Behind her, the base hummed with activity as crews maintained ships, trained for scenarios they hoped would never happen, and monitored communications across the region. The base itself was built into a large asteroid that had been hollowed out and reinforced. It was one of 3 such installations established by the peace treaty, a permanent reminder to both sides of what happened when diplomacy failed. Patricia had been given command of all 3 bases, which meant she spent her time traveling between them and dealing with the complicated business of keeping the peace. A young ensign approached and saluted. "Admiral, we have an incoming shuttle requesting permission to dock. It is from the Talvorian side." Patricia raised an eyebrow. "Did they identify themselves?" "Yes, ma'am. It is Fleet Admiral Kren. He is requesting a meeting with you." That was unexpected. Kren had survived the battle at Velis Nebula by sheer luck. His flagship had been one of the few ships to escape. After the war, he had been reassigned to administrative duties, effectively ending his combat career. Patricia had never met him in person, though she had studied his tactics extensively before their battle. "Grant him permission to dock. I will meet him in conference room 3. 20 minutes later, Patricia sat across a table from the Talvorian admiral who had tried to destroy Earth. He looked older than his file photos suggested. With scars on his face that had not been there before the war, they had both removed their weapons as a gesture of respect, though armed guards waited outside the room on both sides. "Admiral Hayes," Kren said, his voice rough, "thank you for agreeing to meet with me." "Admiral Kren, I admit I am curious about why you are here. I came to see the person who defeated me, and to understand how you did it." He leaned forward slightly. "I have been a military officer for 40 years. I have fought in 17 campaigns. I have studied warfare since I was old enough to read. And you destroyed my fleet in less than 3 hours. I need to know how." Patricia considered her response carefully. This could be an intelligence-gathering operation, or it could be genuine. She decided to give him the benefit of the doubt. "You lost because you fought the way you always fought. Your tactics have not changed significantly in decades. You follow formations that prioritize honor over effectiveness. You announce your attacks and give your enemies time to prepare. And most importantly, you assumed that because humanity was young and small, we would fight like amateurs. But you did not. No. We studied every battle your military ever fought. We analyzed your strengths and weaknesses. We built weapons specifically designed to counter your technology, and when you mobilized your grand fleet, we knew exactly where you would go and how you would get there. The battle was won before you ever entered that system." Kren sat back, his alien features thoughtful. "We were arrogant. The Empire had never faced a serious challenge. We believed our own propaganda about being invincible. Yes, And that arrogance cost thousands of lives on both sides. More than that, it cost us our empire. Kren's voice was bitter. Since the war ended, 6 species have declared independence from Talvorian rule. Our economy is struggling. Our military is a shadow of what it was. The empire that dominated this region for 3 centuries is dying. Patricia felt a twinge of sympathy but pushed it aside. Your empire was built on conquest and intimidation. Maybe it is time for something better to take its place. Perhaps. Kren pulled out a small device and placed it on the table. I came here for another reason as well. There is a situation developing that you need to know about. Patricia tensed. What kind of situation? The Dreth sovereignty rimward from here. They are a militaristic species that has been expanding aggressively for the past decade. When they heard about what happened to the Empire, they saw opportunity. Our intelligence suggests they are planning to invade several former Talvorian worlds, including 2 that border human space. And you are telling me this why? Because the Dreth do not care about honor or restraint. They do not take prisoners. They do not show mercy. If they invade those border worlds, millions will die. And if they succeed, they will eventually turn their attention to human space as well. Patricia studied the Talvorian admiral. You want us to help you? I want to propose a joint defense operation. Talvorian and human forces working together to protect those worlds. Not as enemies, but as allies. The idea was almost absurd. 6 months ago, their fleets had been trying to kill each other. Now he was suggesting they fight side by side. But Patricia had to admit the logic was sound. The Dreth were a threat to both civilizations. I will need to discuss this with Earth Command, but I can tell you right now that any joint operation would require complete transparency on your part. No hidden agendas, no secret plans, full cooperation, agreed. The Empire has learned the cost of deception and arrogance. We cannot afford to make the same mistakes again. Patricia activated her communication console. Then let me make some calls. If we are going to do this, we need to move fast. 3 weeks later, a combined fleet of human and Talvorian ships positioned themselves along the border of the threatened worlds. It was a strange sight. Former enemies now flying in formation together. The crews were wary of each other, but they were professional enough to focus on the mission. The Dreth came as predicted. A fleet of heavily armed warships expecting easy prey. What they found instead was a unified defensive force that had learned from recent experience. The battle was short and decisive. The Dreth retreated, their invasion plans shattered. In the aftermath, Patricia stood on the bridge of the Defiance and watched as Talvorian repair ships helped damaged human vessels. A few months ago, this would have been unthinkable. Now it was necessity becoming routine. Commander Luis Garcia joined her at the viewport. Who would have thought we would end up fighting alongside the Talvorians? The galaxy is full of surprises, Patricia said. A year ago, we were preparing to defend Earth from invasion. Now we are defending Talvorian worlds from someone else. Things change. Do you think it will last? This cooperation? I do not know. But I know that both our civilizations learned important lessons from the war. The Talvorians learned that arrogance leads to defeat, and we learned that being strong does not mean being cruel. Maybe that is enough to build something better. Back on Earth, David Ross sat in a meeting room with representatives from a dozen different species. The war with the Talvorian Empire had opened diplomatic doors that had been closed for years. Everyone wanted to know more about humanity. Everyone wanted treaties and alliances. Ambassador Ross, the representative from the Varan Republic, said, "Your species has proven itself in combat, but we are interested in your approach to peace. You defeated the Empire but did not destroy them. You took what you needed and no more. This is unusual behavior in galactic politics," David smiled. Earth learned a long time ago that crushing your enemies completely just creates more problems down the road. We fought because we had to, but we made peace because we wanted to. The goal was never to replace the Talvorian Empire with a human empire. The goal was justice and security. And now you are helping defend former Talvorian worlds, another representative added. Some species are calling humans the new peacekeepers of this region. We are not peacekeepers. We are survivors who happen to be good at protecting ourselves and, when necessary, others. But we are not looking to police the galaxy. We just want to live in peace and trade with our neighbors. The meeting continued for hours, discussing trade agreements, mutual defense pacts, and cultural exchanges. When it finally ended, David stepped outside and looked up at the stars. Somewhere up there, Patricia was commanding forces that included former enemies. Somewhere up there, human colonies were thriving again after the occupation. Somewhere up there, the galaxy was learning that humanity was not a species to be underestimated or threatened. His phone buzzed with a message from his daughter, who was studying xenobiology at university. She wanted to know if he could help arrange a research trip to one of the Talvorian worlds. David smiled and typed back a reply. Things really were changing. On Forward Base Sentinel, Patricia received orders for her next assignment. The Talvorian Empire had formally requested joint military exercises to improve cooperation between their forces and human fleets. It would be the first time in galactic history that two former enemies trained together so soon after a war. She accepted the assignment without hesitation, not because she trusted the Talvorians completely, but because she understood that the galaxy was a dangerous place. Better to have former enemies become allies than to face new threats alone. The war had ended with humanity's victory, but the story was just beginning. Earth had proven it could defend itself and its people. Now it had the chance to prove it could be a force for stability in a chaotic galaxy, not through conquest or domination, but through strength tempered with wisdom. Patricia looked out at the stars and thought about the future. There would be more challenges ahead. There would be more threats and more difficult decisions. But humanity had shown it could face those challenges without losing sight of who they were. They had ignored the warnings once. They had learned the price of that mistake. And now the galaxy would remember. When humans gave a warning, it was worth listening to. When they offered peace, it was worth accepting. And when they were forced to fight, they would do so with devastating effectiveness. But above all else, they would remain human, protectors when needed, warriors when necessary, but always striving to be better than their worst instincts, always reaching for the peace they knew was worth fighting for. The stars waited, full of possibilities both wonderful and terrible. And humanity, for better or worse, was ready to face them all.